Welcome to Scary Town Stories. I've told this story maybe 6 times, and every time I kind of feel like I'm lying. Not because I want to, but because I honestly don't really know what's real anymore. 2 years ago, my best friend Danny and I went fishing off of the Washington coast. It was early spring, cold, quiet, clear. Every year we rented a small charter boat for the weekend. No captain, just us, some gear, and enough gas to get us 50 miles out. It was kind of a tradition that we started after Danny lost his dad. Danny was off that morning. He didn't crack any jokes like usual. While we loaded the gear, he barely looked at me. When we pushed off, he sat at the bow and stared straight out at the water. I figured he was just dealing with something, relationship stuff, work stress, or, you know. We were about 30 miles out when he finally spoke. He said, "You ever feel like the ocean doesn't want us out here?" I laughed, said something dumb like, "Hasn't stopped us before." He didn't really laugh. He just said, "I don't think it wants me back this time." I gave him a look and said, "Shut up." I went into the cabin for maybe 5 minutes to grab some coffee and some snacks. When I came back up, he was gone. No splash, no yell, no nothing. He was just gone, an empty deck. His pole was still mounted, tackle box untouched. His life vest was on the bench. I spun the boat around, searching the water, called his name until my voice gave out. I even jumped in, thinking maybe he'd fallen and was hanging on to the side, but nothing. Just water. I radioed for help. They responded fast within the hour. I had a chopper above me and 2 boats scanning the area. They searched until dark, found nothing. No body, no clothes. I gave my statement to the cops. They brought me back in. I thought it was the worst of it. But then things got weird. The harbor master checked the launch logs. I'd signed the boat under both our names, but the security footage only showed me boarding. I told them that couldn't be right. We'd loaded the boat together. He was standing right next to me. They showed me the tape again. Just me, loading 2 bags. No one else. I called Danny's phone, still active, but no answer. Went to his apartment, empty. Neighbors said they hadn't seen him in weeks. One even asked, does he still live here? His room looked untouched. No recent mail, no groceries. I started wondering if maybe he'd planned to disappear, until I saw the photo taped to his fridge. It was the 2 of us on the dock that morning. I was smiling, holding up a cooler, and Danny was standing behind me, half in frame, blurry, like maybe he wasn't standing still. But the thing is, I didn't take that photo. I don't remember anyone else being there. It was just us. And the angle it was taken from, that photo would have had to come from, 30 feet off the ground? From a drone? What? The official story is presumed drowning. No foul play, no body, no closure. I didn't argue. I couldn't really. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I remember something weird. Right before I stepped into that cabin that morning, I think Danny said something else. Something I've replayed in my head hundreds of times now, I swear. He whispered, you're gonna forget I was ever here. And for a moment, I think I almost did. So this happened about 2 months ago. I work in a small charter boat out of Newport, Oregon. It's me and my buddy Theo. We do fishing runs, research support, that kind of thing. Mostly uneventful stuff. We were hired by a group of marine biology grad students from Portland State. They needed a ride about 120 miles out. They were doing fish tagging. Nothing too complicated. They were quiet, professional. We barely saw them unless they needed something. On the third night, we were anchored and drifting slowly. The research team was off duty and below deck, and I was watching the radar. At exactly 11:44 p.m., I noticed a small object on the screen. No movement, no ID tag, just sitting there. It wasn't on the screen earlier, and it didn't match any known markers or buoys in the area. Theo thought it might be debris or an untagged boat, maybe some drug runners. So we decided to approach slowly, just in case somebody was in trouble. As we got closer, we realized it was a sailboat. No lights, no name that we could see, just drifting, dead in the water. We circled around and called out a few times. No answers. The thing is, it wasn't really wrecked. There wasn't any damage. The sail was furled and deck looked intact, just completely deserted. We debated calling the Coast Guard, but figured if someone was on board and in trouble, we better check. So we tied off and boarded. Immediately, it felt weird. Below deck looked lived in, like someone had just been there a day or two ago. A half-eaten protein bar on the table, coffee mug in the sink, phone charger still plugged in. But nobody was there. No logs in the radio, no signs of distress. And the really weird part, there was no ID, no boat registration number, nothing, no papers, nothing. Theo found a small notebook near one of the bunks. It kind of looked like one of those travel logs or a journal, but it was mostly doodles and just a couple entries. The last thing written in the book was, "Saw lights again last night, not a boat. Taylor still missing, debating turning around." We left it exactly as we found it. Didn't touch anything. We logged the GPS coordinates, planned to radio the Coast Guard as soon as we were back in range. That night, neither of us slept. We were both on edge about the weirdness. Nothing had technically happened. It just didn't sit right. Just before 3 a.m., I was on watch. I heard movement behind me on the deck, like bare feet on wet wood. Just a few steps. I turn around. No one. But the wheel was slightly turned to the starboard. Not much. Just ever so slightly. I hadn't touched it. Theo hadn't either. He was still below deck. In the morning, we noticed water pooled near the stern. It hadn't rained. And there were footprints. Wet, bare footprints. leading from the back of the boat up to the wheel. Then they stopped. No prints going back, no splashing sounds during the night, just footsteps. We reported everything to the Coast Guard as soon as we could, gave them the coordinates, and described the sailboat. They sent a search team. A week later, we got a call. They couldn't find the boat. No wreckage, no trace. I work as an underwater freelance water inspections, mostly telecom cables and offshore infrastructure. Last September, I got contracted to do a solo dive in North Atlantic. Simple job, really. Document a section of the subsea fiber line that had gone dark after a storm. We were about 60 miles out, nothing but water in every direction. Conditions were pretty good. I've done dozens of these, but this one was odd, to say the least. The cable was at 200 feet, deep enough to be cold and dark, but not too dangerous. I went down with a standard rig, full face mask, lights, camera, comm lines. The descent was smooth, took about 5 minutes, hit the seabed. The cable lay half buried in silt, undisturbed except for one section where it had been cleanly displaced. Not snapped, just moved. Lifted and dropped like something big had pulled it upwards and then let it go. That alone didn't scare me. Cable shift, currents, landslides. Heck, maybe a couple whales came in. But then I saw the markings. About 10 meters down the line, I found something that looked like scratches to the insulation. Not damage, not pressure stress. Looked like symbols, etched, repeated, precise. 3 vertical lines, 2 slashes through them, then again a few feet down, then again. Too uniform for coincidence, too deliberate for nature. I called it in. I asked the topside crew if anyone had been down here before me. There was a brief pause before, "You're the first human diver on that stretch. Everyone else uses ROVs." I turned to move upstream along the cable and it felt it. That shift in pressure you get when something large is behind you. Nothing on sonar, nothing on comms, but I swear I wasn't alone anymore. I kept moving, looking back, breathing slowly, scanning. That's when I saw it. About 20 meters away, a figure, human-shaped, not swimming, just standing on the ocean floor, upright, still. No gear, no bubbles, just there, standing. Maybe a statue? I froze, turned my helmet camera toward it. That feed cut to static for exactly 7 seconds. Then came back. The figure was gone. I aborted the dive immediately. I gave a full report. They chalked it up to nitrogen narcosis. Said my brain was fill in the gaps. But here's the thing. When I reviewed the footage later, there was a 7-second gap. Just like I remembered. And right before the feed cut, you can see a shadow stretch across the silt, like something tall, standing behind me. A week later, someone from the cable company called me privately, said, "We pulled an old inspection footage from 2019, same location, same issue." I asked if anything was on it. He hesitated, then said, "There's a diver in the footage, standing still, right next to the cable." I said, "So what?" And he said, "We don't use divers. That entire job was done remotely." I've been part of a volunteer dive search and rescue group on the Gulf Coast for the last 9 years. We respond when someone goes missing. Fishermen, free divers, sometimes boaters who never come back. This one happened last fall. A recreational diver named Will Jensen. He went out soloing on a weekend. He logged his launch time at 6:42 a.m. Radioed the Coast Guard at 7:10 to say he was starting his descent at Site 6, a popular dive wreck about 70 feet down. He never checked back in. His truck and trailer were still at the ramp. We found his boat drifting about 1.5 miles off course. Engines off, no anchor, air tanks missing, dive bags still zipped. No real sign of a struggle or an accident. We checked the weather, nothing unusual. Water temp and visibility were standard. His GPS had logged coordinates consistent with where he said he'd dive. 2 of us went down the next morning. We found the wreck, nothing out of place. But we also found Will's dive computer, just sitting on the top deck of the wreck, still attached to a glove. At first we thought maybe he lost his gear and surfaced, disoriented. It's happened before. But when we retrieved the dive computer, we saw something that didn't really add up. It was still logging data. Depth, 72 feet. Time, 39 hours. That's not possible. The battery on his model maxes out around 18-20 hours, and there's no way it would still register the same depth unless it was physically underwater the entire time. But we'd already checked the wreck top to bottom the day before. The computer wasn't there. We pulled the data when we surfaced. The log showed something else. Will's descent time was normal, about 4 minutes. Then he stayed at 68 to 73 feet for about 30 minutes. Then the depth flickered, first to 21 feet, then to 0, then to 1,134. Then it stabilized again at 72 and never moved. We thought it might be a malfunction of some kind, maybe pressure damage, but the timestamps kept logging perfectly, down to the second. It was like the computer kept tracking something down there. We swept the area twice more. No body, no tank, no gear, just the glove and the computer that shouldn't have worked. The dive computer was turned over to the Coast Guard. We never got it back, but one of our team members took a photo of the screen before we handed it in. You can see the depth reading, 72 feet, logged 2 days and 5 hours, and a surface interval, meaning it registered that something had surfaced briefly in the middle of the night. But Will never called, never radioed, and he was never found. I run a 22-foot cabin cruiser, nothing special, but she's mine. I've taken her out nearly every weekend for 5 years. Same launch, same gear. I fish solo. I like the silence and the peace. Last Saturday, about 10 miles off the coast, I noticed something in the distance. A white boat, just sitting still. No wake, no engine. I got closer. It was the same make and model as mine. Same hull shape too. Same gray trim, even the little chip on the rail by the stern cleat. But this one had no one on board. At first I thought maybe someone fell overboard, but there was no sign of panic, no scattered gear, no overturned buckets. Everything seemed perfectly neat. Lines coiled, coolers latched, even the keys were still in the ignition. And the weirdest part? The registration numbers. They were exactly the same as mine. I pulled alongside and radioed the Coast Guard, but I knew what they'd say. Probably a duplicate hull ID or a stolen vessel. But I stepped aboard anyway. I mean, I had to. Inside was like someone had tried to copy my boat down to the detail. Same emergency whistle hanging on the dash. Same frayed black cord I keep on the throttle. Same old hoodie stuffed behind the seat. My hoodie. With the burn mark from that time I leaned too close to the stove last year. It even smelled the same. Salt, mildew, coffee grounds. I turned around to look at my own boat drifting just a few feet off, and I swear to God, it was gone. Not sank, not drifted off, just wasn't there anymore. There was only open sea. I turned back to the cabin, and the radio crackled, a voice clipped and distant. "Why'd you leave?" It was my voice, but from last week. I recognized the words. I'd recorded a voice memo while testing the new radio mic, but I deleted it. I bolted back onto the deck, heart pounding. My boat was back, just floating there, like it had never disappeared. But I didn't remember stepping off of it. Didn't really remember tying the two together. And when I climbed back aboard my boat, the original, I think, the first one was gone now. No wake, no sound, just empty water again. I didn't report it. What would I even say, right? But since that day, I've noticed something off. Sometimes the cleat on my rail has a chip. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes the engine struggles like always. Sometimes it runs a little too smooth. Last night I checked my glove box, my emergency whistle, the original plastic one. It's still sealed in the packaging. I've used that whistle twice. I know I have. I remember feeling it in my teeth. So now I gotta ask, which boat am I on? I've done a lot of dives, offshore rigs, reef systems, even a few wrecks. But only once did I try cave diving. It was in the Gulf off the coast of Florida. There's a submerged limestone cave system down there called Coyote's Mouth. It's not tourist level. You have to go deep, and there's only really one way in and one way out. No sunlight once you're past the first bend. My buddy Eric talked me into it. He'd done it once before, said it was tight but manageable. We planned it clean, double tanks, backup lights, wrist slates, safety reels, the whole setup. Entered around 10 a.m., just after tide shift. Descent was smooth. At about 40 feet, the entrance opens up to the right, just wide enough to slide through a single file. The temperature dropped about 5 degrees past the threshold. I remember that. Sharp and sudden. Inside, it was like being swallowed. Silt floor, low ceiling, pitch dark. We kept to the left wall per plan. Eric ahead, me trailing. Our lights carved slow tunnels through the black. About 20 minutes in, I noticed something weird. Our guide line, the one we were spooling as we moved, felt tight. Not snagged, not tangled, just a little too tense, like maybe someone was pulling on it from the other end. I signaled Eric. He gave me a hold sign, turn back. We waited. The line went slack. He shrugged and kept moving, but I didn't forget that pull. A few minutes later, we hit a chamber that opened wider, like a cathedral of stone and water. Eric signaled that we'd go another 10 minutes and turn back. I nodded. We kept going, lights sweeping, nothing but stone, silt, and bubbles. Then I saw something ahead. A diver, light catching a tank. Eric, I figured, until I realized Eric was right in front of me. I blinked. The shape was gone. No bubbles, no silt trail. I tried to write something on my slate, but Eric signaled to turn, so we went back. On the return trip, things felt a little wrong. The cave looked the same, but our guideline was looping in directions I didn't remember. At one point, Eric signaled a fork. I didn't remember a fork, but he went left anyway. I hesitated and then followed. The line let us out eventually. We surfaced near the boat, maybe 90 minutes total dive time. Everything seemed normal, except Eric was already on the boat. He waved, grinned. Took you long enough. I froze, looked back at the water. No bubbles, no splashes, just a still surface. He helped me up, started stripping gear, laughing, talking like it was no big deal. But he hadn't just come up. He was dry. His wetsuit was clean. No silt, no algae, no marks. Mine was scraped to hell. My light was down 40%. His was full. Later, I checked my slate, the one I'd written on inside the cave. The message I'd tried to write down when I saw the other diver. It read, "He's behind me." But I don't remember writing that, and Eric doesn't remember the fork. He swears we took a straight shot out, no turns. I've reviewed the dive cam footage a dozen times, but the last 20 minutes of the video are just static. No light, no sound, no depth data, just static. I used to work for a private salvage company based out of San Diego. Mostly underwater recovery, lost ships, containers, inspection dives, the occasional yacht with a busted hull. Nothing too exciting. Just long hours under the water, lots of paperwork. Except for one job we took in 2021. Still kind of bugs me. Not because something dramatic happened. There's no monster, no ghost. Just something that doesn't make sense. And no one really wanted to talk about it afterwards. That was kind of weird. We were basically hired by this marine research place out of San Diego. They weren't government, but they had the funding, nice gear, tight operation. They were mapping the seafloor off the coast about 90 miles out when their sonar picked something up. The report just said, large object, roughly 20 meters across, possibly container or wreckage, needs visual confirmation. Pretty straightforward. So, we came in to take a look. We went out on a sport vessel with one of their researchers, a woman named Elena. She didn't really say much. Conditions were calm, visibility underwater was better than usual, and around 130 feet down we spotted it right away. It wasn't a container, and it wasn't any kind of wreck. It was a structure. It was perfectly geometric, like perfect angled sides, clean lines, no real corrosion, no seams, no rivets. I don't think it was steel. Not anything I could really identify. There was a square opening on one side, about 4 feet wide. Mark, the lead diver, motioned to go in. I hesitated, but followed. Inside, our lights barely made a difference. It absorbed the light somehow. It kind of felt colder. The walls were the same weird material, totally seamless. No bolts, no welds, just flat panels. No machinery, no cables. But in the center of the floor, which sloped down kind of like a shallow bowl, was what looked like a seat. Not really a chair, not exactly. Just a raised form shaped like someone would sit in it. It didn't really match the rest of the space. It looked like it had been placed there. Mark went in for a closer look, but stopped about 2 feet from it, then turned and gave me a look I've never forgotten. Not scared, but blank, like his brain was clicked off. We did not touch anything. We did not take samples, no photos. When we surfaced, Elena was there waiting. She didn't really ask what we saw. She just said, "You're done. We're good. We got what we need." We asked her what it was, and she just really said, "Can't go into it," but that it wasn't the only one they found. In the end, they paid us. No non-disclosure forms or anything weird like that, but it was cash. Mark left the job not long after. He didn't quit suddenly or act freaked out. He just stopped taking dive contracts. Told me he was kind of burned out. He moved to Arizona a few months later. I haven't really talked to him since. But sometimes when I'm out diving alone, I think about his face. That blank stare. What was that thing? What happened to Mark?
Thank you for joining us at Scary Town Stories. We appreciate it and hope you enjoyed. Remember to subscribe and leave a comment.